Claude responded, I noticed I'll be watching from Dayton this time, at least in spirit. I noticed I'll be watching from Dayton this time, at least in spirit. Here's the new story, built on the analyzed formula but entirely new people, place, and plot. I went to my granddaughter's college graduation to see my daughter walk across that stage. Instead, I found her in the parking lot afterward, kneeling on the asphalt in her cap and gown, scrubbing a coffee stain out of her mother-in-law's white slacks with a napkin from her own purse, while the woman stood over her saying, This is why I told my son not to marry someone who still waits tables. I stood there and did nothing. 6 weeks later, my daughter's mother-in-law knocked on my front door alone and asked me what it would take to make this go away. I'm grateful you're watching, whoever and wherever you are. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. I read every one, and it means more to me than you'd guess from an old man sitting alone in his kitchen. And one honest note before we start. Some details in this story have been changed or blended for the sake of telling it right. Names, places, small things like that. But what it has to say about family and pride and what a father owes his child, that part's true enough for anybody. My name is Walter Pruitt. I'm 66 years old. I spent 38 years driving long-haul freight out of a terminal in Toledo, Ohio, hauling everything from steel coil to frozen chicken to a truckload of Christmas trees one December that smelled so good, I still think about it sometimes. I've got a bad shoulder from a jackknife outside Terre Haute in 1996 and a permanent squint from 30 years of highway sun through a windshield. My wife Donna used to say I looked like I was always about to tell a joke, even when I wasn't. Donna's been gone 2 years this coming August. I still make coffee for 2 most mornings. Habit, I guess. Or maybe just hope wearing a disguise. I pour the second cup, let it sit until it's cold, then pour it out. I've never once managed to stop myself from making it. The house is a small 2-story on Larchmont Avenue in a part of Toledo that used to be solidly middle class and is now solidly hanging on. We bought it in 1989 for $81,000, which felt like robbery at the time in the good direction. I built the deck off the back myself in 2004. Donna picked out every tile in the kitchen personally, standing in the aisle at the hardware store for 40 minutes, comparing 2 shades of blue that looked identical to me and apparently were not identical at all to her. My daughter Cassidy is 31. She's the only child Donna and I had, and from the day she was born, she had her mother's stubborn chin and my inability to leave a job half-finished. She waited tables through most of her 20s to put herself through school, night classes, slow semesters, the whole grinding path, because we never had the kind of money that makes college simple. She graduated last month with a degree in social work at 31 years old, which is either late or exactly on time, depending on how you want to look at it. I know how I look at it. I look at it like the proudest thing I've witnessed since her wedding day. Cassidy, I married Preston Hale 4 years ago. Preston's a decent enough young man on his own, quiet, a little soft in the way men get when nobody's ever made them do a hard day's physical work, but decent. His mother is a different matter entirely. Marjorie Hale is the kind of woman who says, no offense, directly before offending you. Like the phrase itself is a receipt she's keeping for later. She and her late husband built a chain of dental offices across Northwest Ohio, and somewhere in that process, Marjorie came to believe that money was not just something you had, but something you were. She'd never said a cruel word to my face, not directly. She had a gift for something worse, the kind of comment that sounds like concern, until you're alone in your truck 20 minutes later, and it finally lands. My neighbor Sal Renzetti has lived next door for 22 years, retired now from the city water department, and he's got the same gift Donna had for saying a thing once and then leaving it alone. He was on my porch the Tuesday before graduation, the two of us splitting a thermos of coffee on the steps, because the weather had finally turned decent. You going down to Columbus this weekend? He asked. Wouldn't miss it, I said. Cassidy earned that walk twice as hard as anybody else crossing that stage. Sal turned his cup in his hands. How's she doing, really? Not the version she tells you. I didn't answer right away, because Sal wasn't wrong to ask it that way, and we both knew it. She sounds tired, I admitted. Tired in a way that's not about finals. Sal nodded like he'd expected that answer. That Hale woman still in the picture heavy? Heavier every year, seems like. You ever tell Cassidy what you really think of her? She married into that family. Wasn't my place to make it harder. Sal was quiet a moment. Walter, I've watched you carry other men's kids off. Collapsed, loading docks. I've watched you drive through blizzards nobody with sense would drive through. I have never once watched you back down from anything in 22 years of knowing you. He set his cup down. Except this. This, you just watch happen. I didn't have an answer for that one. I still don't. Not really. Except that watching your grown daughter get quietly diminished by someone who signs her own checks feels different than any kind of danger I ever knew how to fight. The morning of graduation was bright and a little too warm for May, the kind of day that makes everybody squint in the photographs afterward. I put on the navy sport coat Donna had picked out for our 30th anniversary dinner, the only good jacket I own, and drove the 2 hours down to Columbus with the windows cracked and the radio off, just my own thoughts and the highway. The arena held maybe 4,000 people, families packed into bleacher seats, programs turned into fans against the heat. I found my row and sat beside an empty seat I'd saved out of habit before remembering there was no one left to fill it. Preston's family had a block of reserved seats near the front. Marjorie had apparently made a donation substantial enough to earn better placement, which she mentioned to 3 different people within my hearing before the ceremony even started. Cassidy crossed that stage in her cap and gown, and when they called her name, Cassidy Pruitt Hale, Bachelor of Social Work, magna cum laude, something came up in my chest that I hadn't expected, a pressure right behind my sternum that I recognized from exactly one other day in my life, the day she was born. I stood up. I couldn't help it. A few other people around me stood too, strangers, caught up in whatever it is that makes people rise for someone else's child crossing a stage they worked years to reach. I looked over at the Hale section. Marjorie was checking her phone. Afterward, everyone spilled out into the parking structure in that particular chaos of caps and gowns and balloons and people trying to find their cars in a space designed by someone who apparently hated joy. I was walking toward the reception hall with the flowers I'd bought, a modest bouquet, all I could reasonably afford, but real ones, not the grocery store kind, when I heard Marjorie's voice carrying across 2 rows of parked cars. Cassidy. Cassidy, look what you did. I came around a minivan and saw them. Marjorie stood beside her cream-colored Lexus, holding her blazer open, staring down at a coffee stain, spreading across the front of her white slacks, a paper cup lying tipped on its side near her feet, apparently knocked from a cup holder or a car door in the crush of the crowd. And there was my daughter, in her cap and gown, degree still in the tube under her arm, down on both knees on the hot asphalt, dabbing at Marjorie's slacks with a fistful of napkins from her own purse. I'm so sorry, Marjorie. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, I promise. These are Italian, Cassidy. Do you have any idea? I know. I'm sorry. I'll get them fixed. Marjorie looked down at her, at my daughter kneeling in her graduation gown on a parking garage floor, dabbing frantically at a stranger's ruined slacks, and she said the thing I will hear in my sleep for the rest of my life. This is exactly why I told Preston not to marry someone who still waits tables for a living. Some things don't wash out, sweetheart. Not the stain, the habit. Then she looked up, saw people watching, and arranged her face into something almost gentle. Get up, you'll ruin your gown too. As if that were the kindness in the moment. I was 11 steps away. I counted them walking back to my truck an hour later, the way you count a thing you didn't do so you can carry the exact weight of it. 11 steps and 38 years of hauling freight through every kind of weather America has to offer. And I stood there behind a minivan with a bouquet of flowers going soft in my hand, and I did not move. I want to tell you I stayed frozen out of some wisdom, some fatherly restraint I'd earned. That's not true. I stayed frozen because for one terrible second I saw my daughter's face turn toward the sound of Marjorie's voice, searching not for rescue, I understood later, but checking to see if anyone had witnessed it. The particular fear of a person who's been quietly shrunk down for so long that being seen feels more dangerous than the humiliation itself. And in that half second, before I could move my own feet, Preston appeared from the other side of the car, took one look at the scene, and said, "Mom, it was an accident. Let it go," in the voice of a man who has said that exact sentence in that exact tone many, many times before. Cassidy stood up. She smoothed her gown. She smiled, the smile I recognized from every photograph she'd sent me over the past 2 years. Technically a smile, containing none of the things a smile is supposed to contain. She saw me then, over Marjorie's shoulder, and something crossed her face, relief and mortification tangled together so tight I couldn't have separated them with a torch. "Dad, you made it." Said I would. I told her, and hugged her, gown and all, and felt her shaking very slightly. The kind of shake you only notice if you've held that particular person since she was 6 pounds, 4 ounces, and screaming in a hospital room in 1994. "You didn't have to see that," she said quietly into my shoulder. "I'm proud of you," I said, which was true, and also the only thing I could manage to say that wasn't going to come out as something I'd regret in front of 400 strangers in a parking garage. We went to the reception. I shook Marjorie's hand when it was offered, her slacks now blotted but still visibly ruined, and she said, "Your daughter worked so hard, didn't she?" in the tone people use when they mean the opposite of the words coming out of their mouth. I held her hand a beat longer than necessary and said, "She surely did. Every bit of it herself," and watched something flicker behind Marjorie's eyes, gone as fast as it appeared. I drove home that night with the radio off again. Somewhere around Marion, Ohio, in the dark with nothing but my headlights and the white lines, I let myself feel the whole thing at once, and I had to pull into a gas station and sit in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I trusted my hands on the wheel again. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in the bed Donna and I had shared for 30 years and stared at the ceiling fan turning slow circles until 3 in the morning. And somewhere in there, I started thinking about a conversation Donna and I had 4 years ago, 3 weeks before Cassidy's wedding. We were at the kitchen table, the blue-tiled kitchen, the one she'd picked every color for, and Donna wasn't sick yet, not that we knew of, just tired in a way we both blamed on getting older. She reached across and put her hand flat on top of mine. "Walt, I need you to actually hear me on this one," she said. "I'm listening. I don't trust Marjorie Hale." She said it plain. No drama, the way Donna said the things that mattered most. It's not the money. God knows it's not the money. It's the way she looks at Cassidy like she's something that needs fixing before it can be useful. I told her Cassidy was a grown woman who could handle her own mother-in-law. I told her every new marriage has friction with the in-laws and it would smooth out with time. Donna pulled her hand back slow and looked out the window at the maple in our own backyard, the one I'd planted for her the year Cassidy was born. "You'll see it eventually, Walt," she said. "I just hope you see it in time to do something about it." I hadn't thought about that conversation in years. Sitting there at 3 in the morning with the ceiling fan turning, I thought about nothing else. Sal came over at his usual hour, 6:30, and let himself in the back door the way he'd been doing since Donna's funeral, when he decided without asking that a man alone shouldn't have to answer his own door every morning. He took one look at me yesterday's shirt, the coffee pot already run dry twice, and sat down across from me without a word. Same as always. I told him what I'd seen. The parking garage, the coffee stain, my daughter on her knees on the asphalt, the sentence about waiting tables that I will carry to my grave. Sal listened without interrupting, turning his mug in slow circles the way he does when he's working something out. "Walt," he said finally, "this isn't the first time, is it?" I looked at him. 2 months back, Sal said. Cassidy called Donna's old number by accident. Some kind of muscle memory. Must have still had it saved somewhere. Talked to my Linda for 20 minutes before she realized it wasn't you. Linda said she sounded like a woman running on fumes. Kept saying she was fine. Said it too many times for it to mean fine. My stomach found somewhere new and lower to sit. "You never told me that. Wasn't my place. But I've been sitting on it, and after yesterday I don't think I can sit on it anymore." He reached across and put his hand on my forearm, the way men our age do when the words aren't going to be enough on their own. "That's not a woman who's doing fine, Walt. That's a woman who's been shrinking herself down to fit somebody else's house for 4 years running." "What do I do?" "You already know," Sal said. "You call Renata Cho." Renata Cho had handled Donna's estate paperwork after she passed, sharp and unhurried. A woman who wrote everything down by hand on yellow legal pads because she said typing made people trust their memory more than they should. Donna had liked her, instantly. Said she had a lawyer's eyes and a grandmother's patience, which Donna considered the rarest possible combination. I drove downtown that same morning and sat across from Renata's desk, telling her everything in the flat. Sequenced way I'd give a dispatch report, the stain, the parking garage, the sentence, 4 years of small comments finally adding up to a total I could no longer avoid doing the math on, Renata wrote without looking up until I finished, then set her pen down. Your wife came to see me, she said, 11 months before she passed. My hands went still on the arms of the chair. She made the appointment under her maiden name. Said she didn't want it showing up anywhere Marjorie's people might see it. Renata opened a folder that had been sitting. I realized exactly where she could reach it without searching. She had 2 questions. First, whether Preston's mother had any legal standing to influence decisions about your and Donna's estate, given how involved she'd become in Cassidy and Preston's finances. Does she? None. Your assets are yours. Cassidy's inheritance, when it comes, is hers outright, structured so no one else's name can attach to it, exactly the way Donna set it up. Renata looked at me over her glasses. Her second question was whether it was possible for a person to systematically make someone financially dependent on purpose, as a form of control, without ever technically doing anything illegal. Is it? It's not just possible, Mr. Pruitt. I told your wife it's one of the oldest tricks in family law, and one of the hardest to prove until it's gone on long enough that the pattern speaks for itself. She closed the folder gently. And she said she'd come back if she learned more. She never got the chance. The room went quiet except for the traffic sound through the window, ordinary Toledo going about its ordinary Thursday. What do you know now that you didn't before? I asked. The first of signed. Renata leaned back. I made some calls after you phoned me this morning, before you even got here. Preston and Cassidy's mortgage, the one on the house Marjorie helped them buy 2 years ago, has Marjorie's name on the deed as a co-signer with equity rights. Not just a co-signer on the loan, equity rights. My jaw tightened until it ached. Meaning? Meaning, if that marriage were to end for any reason, Marjorie would be entitled to claim a portion of that house's value, directly, regardless of what Preston and Cassidy agreed between themselves. It's not illegal. It's just very carefully arranged. Renata slid a paper across the desk, a copy of a deed filing. I believe it was arranged so that Cassidy would understand, whether consciously or not, that her marriage and her housing security were never entirely separate from Marjorie's goodwill. I sat with that, the way you sit with an X-ray, that finally shows you the thing you'd been afraid. Was there? A whole time. There's something else, Renata said. Preston works for his mother's dental supply distribution company. His salary, his title, his eventual partnership, every bit of his financial future runs through Marjorie's approval. Cassidy told you she's tired. I'd imagine she's tired of watching her husband perform gratitude for a living every single day of his life. What can we do? Quite a bit, Renata said, and picked her pen back up. I'm going to send a formal request to the county recorder's office for a full history of that deed filing. Who requested what and when, that's public record, and I want it documented cleanly. I'm also going to draft something Donna asked me to have ready, actually, back when she first came to see me. She reached into the same drawer and produced a second folder, older, the paper slightly yellowed at the edges. Your wife drafted a letter. She never finished deciding whether to send it. My chest went tight in a way I recognized from exactly one hospital room, 3 years back. A letter to who? To Cassidy, Renata said gently. She wanted her daughter to have it if things ever came to a head. She just didn't know when that would be, or whether she'd still be here to decide it herself. She slid the folder across the desk. I think it's time, Mr. Pruitt. I sat in my truck in the parking lot outside Renata's office for a long time before I opened it. Donna's handwriting filled about half the page, the careful, slanted print she used for things that mattered, dated the January before she passed. During one of the good weeks between treatments when her hands still held steady, Cassidy, she'd written, I don't know if your father will ever give you this letter, or if by the time he does, things will already have worked themselves out on their own. I hope they have. I hope you never need to read this at all. But I've watched you get smaller for 4 years now, sweetheart, and I need you to know that I saw it, even when I couldn't say it right. You are not lucky to have Marjorie's help. You were never behind before you married into that family, and you are not behind now. You worked every double shift it took to put yourself through school, and that degree belongs entirely to you, not to anybody who ever made you feel small for the years it took to earn it. If a day ever comes where you're kneeling for someone who calls your hard work a habit that doesn't wash out, I need you to remember whose daughter you are. Your father has never once in his life let anybody talk down to the people he loves without answering for it. And if he's holding back right now, it's only because he's trying to let you handle your own life the way I always told him to. But sweetheart, if it ever gets to be too much, you tell him. He will move mountains, and he will not ask you why until after they're already moved. I love you more than this page will ever hold. Mom. I don't remember the drive home. I remember sitting in my own driveway afterward with the engine off, the letter in my lap, and finally letting myself cry the way I hadn't let myself cry since the funeral. Ugly and unguarded. Alone in a truck in front of the house Donna picked every tile for. I called Cassidy that night. I didn't lead with the letter. I led with the truth, plain, the way her mother always told the truth. I told her I'd seen the parking garage. I told her I'd counted the steps I didn't take and that I was done not taking them. She was quiet a long moment on the other end of the line, and then she said, in a voice much smaller than the one she uses when she's performing fine for the world, "Dad, I don't know how to get out from under her. Everything's tangled up in everything else now." "Then we untangle it," I said, one knot at a time, starting tomorrow. The next 6 weeks moved like a controlled demolition, careful and quiet and entirely legal. Renata filed the paperwork on the deed history, and it came back exactly as suspected. Marjorie had structured the co-signing herself, through her own attorney, 18 months into the marriage. At a point, Cassidy remembered only as Marjorie being generous about the down payment. Renata helped Cassidy understand her actual legal footing, separate from anything Marjorie had implied over 4 years of carefully worded concern. Preston, when Cassidy finally sat him down and showed him the paperwork, went pale and quiet in a way that told me everything about how long he'd known, on some buried level, that something wasn't right, and how long he'd talked himself out of looking at it directly. He is, in his own way, a man who inherited his mother's house before he ever got the chance to choose whether he wanted it. I didn't confront Marjorie myself. I didn't need to. Renata sent one clean, factual letter outlining the deed irregularity and requesting Marjorie release her equity claim voluntarily, given that continued pursuit of it would require disclosing the original arrangement's timeline and intent to a family court, should Cassidy and Preston ever need that protection. It wasn't a threat. It was just true, laid out flat the way Renata lays everything out. Marjorie showed up at my door on a Tuesday morning, alone, no assistant, no attorney trailing behind her, driving her own Lexus instead of having someone drive her. She looked smaller standing on my front walk than she had in that parking garage, the particular smallness of a person whose currency has just been quietly recounted and come up short. "Walter," she said, "Marjorie." I stepped back to let her in, because that's simply how I was raised, and led her to the kitchen, the blue-tiled one, because whatever this was going to be, it was going to happen at that table. Same as everything that's ever mattered in this house. "Black?" I asked. "Black," she said, surprised I remembered, though I didn't. Really, I just poured 2 cups the same way I do every morning, out of habit and hope. She sat with her hands flat on the table, the way people sit when they're trying hard to look composed and not quite landing it. "I read Renata's letter," she said. "I assumed you did. You could have called me directly. Handled this like adults." I let that sit a moment. "I did handle it like an adult, Marjorie. I hired a lawyer instead of showing up at your daughter's graduation and making a scene." Something in her face tightened, recognizing the shape of her own words, handed back to her. "What do you want?" she finally asked. "I want you off that deed," I said. "I want Cassidy and Preston's home to belong to them, completely, with nothing left dangling over it that you could pull on someday if you didn't like a decision they made. That's all I want. I was helping them. You were making sure they'd always owe you something," I said, keeping my voice level, the same voice I used to use talking a nervous rookie driver down off a jackknifed rig. "There's a difference, and I think you've always known it." She was quiet a long moment. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside the window, the maple I'd planted the year Cassidy was born moved in the breeze. 30 years grown now, taller than the house. "She was never good enough in my head," Marjorie said finally, so quietly I almost missed it. "Not because of anything she did, because I built everything I have out of nothing. and I couldn't stand the thought that my son would marry someone who didn't have to. She looked down at her own hands. That's not her failing. That's mine. I know that. I've known it for longer than I've been willing to say out loud. I didn't offer her comfort for that admission. It wasn't my job to make Marjorie Hale feel better about the 4 years she'd spent quietly grinding my daughter down to a size she found acceptable. She reached into her handbag and slid a folded document across the table, a notarized release relinquishing her equity claim on the deed, signed, dated, that same morning. I had my attorney draw this up last night, she said. I'll have Renata verify it, I told her. That's fine. She stood, gathered her purse, looked around my kitchen at the blue tile Donna had picked out tile by tile 20 years ago. You built all this yourself? Most of it, I said. It shows, she said, and let herself out, and I heard her car start and pull away and blend into the ordinary sounds of a Tuesday morning on Larchmont Avenue. I called Renata that afternoon. She came, I said. I know, Renata said. She called my office an hour before she went to see you, asking what it would take to make this disappear quietly. I told her the only door out of this ran through your kitchen table, not mine. A pause. Did she bring paperwork? Signed and notarized. Then I think it's over, Walter. I looked at Donna's photograph on the counter, the one from our anniversary dinner, her laughing at something just off camera. Yeah, I said. I think so too. Labor Day weekend, 4 months later, had that particular late summer Ohio light, gold going soft at the edges, the kind of afternoon that makes you want to sit outside a little longer than sense allows. I was at the grill in my own backyard, under my own maple tree, corn and bratwurst instead of ribs, and I heard Cassidy's car pull into the driveway before I heard the back gate. Things had changed in 4 months in ways I'm not sure I could have predicted the morning I found her kneeling on that parking garage floor. Preston had left his mother's company quietly, without drama, taken a position at a competitor, 2 towns over, at a smaller salary, and, from what I can tell, watching him now, roughly 4 times the peace of mind. Marjorie still saw Cassidy at holidays, still made her occasional pointed comment about vegetables or vacations or anything else she could find a way to needle. But there was a different weight to it now, the comments of a woman who understands she no longer holds the only rope in the room. Cassidy came through the back gate first, and behind her, in the stroller Preston was pushing, my 6-month-old grandson, Theo, who has Donna's exact stubborn chin and, if I'm being honest, my own inability to leave a nap half-finished. Cassidy hugged me hard, the real kind, no performance left in it at all. Smells good, Dad. Bratwurst first. Corn's got a few more minutes. She pulled up a lawn chair, and Preston settled Theo's stroller in the shade. And for an hour, we did nothing more complicated than eat outside and watch a baby try to grab at the light coming through the maple leaves. I've been thinking about something, Cassidy said, once the plates were cleared and Preston had wandered off to walk Theo around the yard. I want to specialize in family law, once I've got a few years of casework behind me, not the ugly kind of family law. The kind that helps people get out from under things they shouldn't have to carry alone. That sounds exactly right, I told her, and meant it more than she probably knew. I've been thinking about something too, I said, and went inside to the kitchen drawer, not the one with the bills, the other one, where I keep the things I can't bring myself to throw away and haven't yet found the right moment to hand over. I brought out the envelope, her name on the front in her mother's handwriting. She looked at it a long moment without touching it. Is this from Mom? She wrote it for you before she passed. I've been holding on to it. Cassidy picked it up carefully, the way you handle something that might not survive being handled roughly. Her jaw worked once, quiet. I want to read this tonight, she said, after Theo's down. It's yours, I said. Read it whenever you're ready. She tucked it into her bag. Close, the way you'd carry something breakable. From across the yard, Preston called out that Theo had found a dandelion and was refusing, on principle, to let go of it. Cassidy laughed. A real one, and got up to go see. And I sat there under the maple Donna planted the year my daughter was born, watching my grandson grip a weed like it was the most important discovery of his entire 6-month-old life, and I understood something I hadn't let myself say out loud until just then. I am not a man who hands out advice easily. 38 years behind the wheel of a truck taught me that most problems don't get solved with words. They get solved with your hands, with showing up, with the willingness to stay in a hard conversation instead of driving off into the night with the radio turned off so you don't have to think about what you just watched happen. But if this last year taught me anything, it's this. Don't count the steps you didn't take and call it wisdom. The people you love were never asking you to stay quiet to protect them. They were asking you to trust what you already knew, the way Donna always trusted it, and to move before the moment closes. If this story found something in you tonight, if you've ever sat in your own kitchen wondering whether you said enough, whether you showed up soon enough for somebody who needed you, tell me about it in the comments below. Tell me where you're watching from tonight. These stories exist because you keep showing up for them, and every single comment reminds me why they're worth telling in the first place. If this one reached you, share it with somebody who's carrying a version of it they haven't found the words for yet. And if you haven't subscribed, one tap keeps you here for every story still ahead of us. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end of this one. It means more than I know how to say. One last note before I let you go. This channel tells stories built from real feeling, even when the details themselves are shaped for the telling. If that's not what you came looking for tonight, no hard feelings at all. And I hope you find exactly what you're looking for elsewhere. But if you believe an ordinary father can still do something extraordinary for the people he loves, when it finally counts, you're exactly where you belong. Until next time, Claude responded, sometimes the people we love aren't asking us to protect them with silence. They're asking us to trust what our own gut already told us and to move before. Sometimes the people we love aren't asking us to protect them with silence. They're asking us to trust what our own gut already told us and to move before the moment slips shut. A little courage, offered at the right time, can untangle years of quiet hurt. Love shows up best, not in grand gestures, but in finally taking the steps we always knew we should. A gentle note. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely to entertain you, while hoping to leave behind a small, positive lesson worth carrying home.